The prisoner who wouldn't leave. The battlefield was covered in smoke and fire. Explosions shook the ground as Captain Elias Carter ran through the ruins, his pulse racing. The war between humanity and the Valeri had lasted for years, but today the fight was over. The Valeri had lost. Their last base on this planet was destroyed. Elias stepped over the bodies of fallen soldiers, both human and Valeri. He had no time to think about them. His mission was clear: find the last remaining prisoner and bring her back to the command ship. The War Council had ordered him to capture one specific enemy, a dangerous Valeri warrior named Cirrus. She was unlike the others. The reports said she was faster, stronger, and more skilled than any Valeri they had faced. The council wanted to study her. Elias did not care about research. He just wanted this war to end. He moved deeper into the burning ruins and heard a noise, a low, painful breathing. He raised his rifle and stepped forward carefully. Then he saw her. Cirrus was on the ground, her dark armor broken, her silver-blue skin covered in wounds. Her long black hair was matted with blood. Even injured, she glared at him with piercing violet eyes, full of hate and defiance. "You are the last one," Elias said, keeping his gun pointed at her. "Your people are gone. Surrender." Cirrus bared her sharp teeth. "Kill me, human," she spat. "I will never be your prisoner." Elias frowned. He had expected this. The Valeri would rather die than be captured. But orders were orders. "You don't have a choice," he said. He reached for the neural restraint collar on his belt. "This will keep you from attacking." As soon as he snapped the collar around her neck, something went wrong. A sudden shockwave of energy erupted from Cirrus, knocking Elias back. His vision blurred, and for a moment, everything felt strange. A deep, unnatural force pulsed through the air. Then the feeling was gone. Elias groaned and stood up. Cirrus was still lying on the ground, panting, but something in her expression had changed. Her eyes were wide. Her body was tense. He grabbed her arm. "Move." She hesitated, just for a second, but then, to his surprise, she obeyed. They walked through the ruins, heading toward the extraction point. Elias kept his gun ready, expecting her to try and escape, but Cirrus did not resist. She followed him. That was when he noticed something strange. Even when he stopped walking, she stopped. When he turned left, she turned left. When he took a step forward, she moved at the exact same time. Elias narrowed his eyes. "What are you doing?" Cirrus looked as confused as he felt. She clenched her fists, breathing heavily. "I don't know." Elias watched her closely. He needed to test something. He suddenly took 3 quick steps backward. Cirrus instantly moved with him, her body reacting before she could even think. Her eyes widened in shock. Elias felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Cirrus was breathing fast, as if she was fighting something invisible. She gritted her teeth and tried to step away. Her body refused to move in the opposite direction. It was as if she was physically unable to walk away from him. She let out a low growl of frustration. "What have you done to me, human?" Elias shook his head. "I don't know. This wasn't supposed to happen." Cirrus clenched her fists, her sharp nails digging into her palms. "You expect me to follow you like some pet?" Elias pointed at her collar. "That collar is just a neural dampener. It stops you from attacking. But this," he gestured between them, "this is something else." Cirrus tried again to resist. Her muscles tensed. Sweat dripped down her forehead. But no matter how much she fought, her body refused to disobey. It was a bond. Something deeper than technology, deeper than control. She was forced to stay by his side. Elias did not like this. He did not trust her. But there was no time to figure this out. He heard the distant roar of approaching ships. Reinforcements were coming. "Let's go," he ordered. Cirrus hesitated for a split second. But then, against her will, she followed him. The realization hit both of them at the same time. Wherever he went, she had no choice but to follow, bound by an unbreakable connection. The command ship Osiris hovered high above the battlefield, its massive frame cutting through the darkness of space. Inside, Captain Elias Carter marched through the dimly lit corridors, his mind racing. Behind him, Ceres followed. Every step he took, she mirrored. Every pause, every shift in movement, she reacted instantly, as if their bodies were tied by an invisible force. The other soldiers noticed. Some glanced in confusion, others in fear. Elias didn't blame them. The Velari were humanity's most feared enemy. Seeing one walking beside a human without chains, it was unnatural. And it wasn't just the walking. She wasn't struggling. A prisoner, especially a Velari, should have been resisting, cursing, or trying to escape. But Ceres? She moved like a shadow, her expression unreadable. He stopped at the entrance of the containment chamber. She stopped. He turned his head slightly. She turned too. Elias clenched his jaw. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. "You're doing it again," he said, narrowing his eyes at her. Ceres tensed, her violet eyes burning with frustration. "You think I want this?" she hissed. "You think I enjoy this? This sickness?" Elias frowned. Sickness. Before he could respond, the heavy doors of the containment chamber slid open. "Get inside," he ordered. For a moment, Ceres hesitated, her first sign of resistance. Then, as if an invisible force pulled her forward, her body moved on its own. She stepped into the cell, stiff and controlled, her hands clenched at her sides. She couldn't stop herself. Elias watched as the force field activated, sealing her inside. He turned to leave. But the moment he stepped away, Ceres flinched. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, and her knees nearly buckled. Elias froze. What the hell was that? Ceres took a shaky breath, her face pale. "I don't know." "You're lying," Elias said. Ceres glared at him, but said nothing. Elias stared at her through the glowing force field. Something was seriously wrong. The neural collar should have only blocked aggression. Not this. A deep voice interrupted his thoughts. "Captain Carter." Elias turned to see Dr. Adrian Veros, lead scientist of the Osiris, watching them with sharp, calculating eyes. His white lab coat was crisp, his face lined with curiosity. "What do you have?" Elias asked. Veros glanced at Ceres. "The scans came back. I think you'll want to see this." The truth begins to unfold. Elias followed Veros to the research deck. Holograms filled the room. Scans of Ceres' brain, nervous system, and DNA. The data looked wrong. "Explain," Elias said. Veros folded his arms. "We assumed the neural collar caused this effect. We were wrong. The bond between you and the Velari prisoner, it's not technology. It's something biological." Elias stiffened. "Biological?" Veros nodded. He tapped one of the holograms. "Her body has undergone rapid genetic adaptation since coming into contact with you. The moment the neural collar was activated, something in her physiology changed." Elias' stomach tightened. What kind of change? Veros leaned in. "She's linked to you." Elias exhaled slowly. "Linked? How?" Veros' expression darkened. "Her nervous system is responding to yours. Her heartbeat syncs with yours. If you move, her body automatically reacts. If you're in pain, her body feels it too. If you die..." "Stop!" Elias cut him off. He rubbed his temples. "This can't be happening." Veros sighed. "It gets worse." Elias looked up. "How?" Veros tapped another hologram. It showed a Velari genetic sequence, mixed with something else. Something human. Elias' chest tightened. "What am I looking at?" Veros hesitated. "She's not fully Velari, or at least, not anymore. Your DNA is rewriting hers. The more time she spends near you, the more." She changes. Elias felt a deep, unfamiliar dread settle in his stomach. Saris was becoming human. Saris realizes the truth. Back in the containment cell, Saris paced, her mind spinning. This bond, this curse, was worse than she imagined. Every moment, she could feel Elias' presence, his emotions, his movements. It was wrong. The Velari were warriors. Proud, independent, superior. They did not follow humans like obedient pets. And yet here she was. Her body refused to move away from him. The farther he went, the weaker she felt. The thought of separation, true separation, made something inside her panic. Saris clenched her fists. No, she would not accept this. But then, the doors hissed open and Elias walked in. She immediately straightened. Her body tensed. Her breathing fell in sync with his, her muscles primed to move if he moved. Saris' heart pounded. No, 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 no. She slammed a fist against the wall. What did you do to me? Elias' expression was hard. I was hoping you could tell me. Saris turned to him, her violet eyes burning with fury. I am Velari. My kind do not serve humans. We do not. She stopped, her breath hitching. Elias had shifted his stance, and she had mirrored him. Her stomach turned. This was worse than slavery. This was something deeper, something irreversible. You should know something, Elias said quietly. Saris looked at him, rage and fear warring in her mind. The Velari Empire knows what's happening to you, Elias continued. And they're afraid. Saris frowned. Afraid. Elias nodded. They sent a transmission. One simple order. Saris felt a chill run down her spine. What order? Elias' voice was low and grim. Kill her. Immediately. Betrayal or loyalty. The command deck of Osiris was buzzing with activity. Holographic displays flickered as officers scrambled to process the incoming transmission. The air was thick with tension. Captain Elias Carter stood frozen, staring at the message on the screen. Kill her immediately. The order came directly from the Velari Empire. They didn't demand Saris' return. They didn't offer negotiations. They wanted her dead. Why? Elias turned his gaze toward the containment chamber surveillance feed. Saris stood rigid, fists clenched, her body unnaturally still. She had heard the order. He could see it in the way her fingers twitched, the way her chest rose and fell in shallow, controlled breaths. She wasn't afraid. Velari warriors didn't fear death. But there was something else. Something deeper. Confusion. Elias wasn't sure if that made him feel better or worse. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Darren Holt, shifted beside him. Captain, we have clear orders. If we follow through, it might buy us time. The Velari won't retaliate if we... Elias shot him a sharp look. You think killing her is the answer? Holt's jaw tightened. She's our enemy. Elias exhaled slowly. He had fought in this war long enough to see through lies. This wasn't just about Saris being an enemy. The Velari weren't eliminating a prisoner. They were eliminating a threat. Something's not right, Elias muttered. He turned to Dr. Veros, who stood nearby, his arms folded. If she was just a soldier, why go to this extreme? What aren't they telling us? Veros tapped a display, bringing up Saris' biological scan. Her genetic shift is still accelerating. It's not stopping. Elias narrowed his eyes. Meaning? Veros hesitated. Meaning, we don't know what she's becoming. And I think, neither do the Velari. A cold silence settled over them. Elias turned back to Holt. We're not killing her. Holt stiffened. Captain, if we disobey. You have your orders, Elias said firmly. She stays alive. Holt's expression darkened, but he said nothing. For now. Inside the containment cell, Saris stood in the center of the force-fielded room, her mind racing. Kill her. Her own people had sentenced her to death. Not even a trial. No rescue attempt. Just a cold, immediate execution order. She had spent her entire life fighting for the Valeri Empire. She had trained since childhood, endured the brutal warrior trials, earned her place among the strongest of her kind. And now, they had cast her aside like an unwanted experiment, her hands clenched. She had been willing to die in battle, to fight until her last breath. But this felt different. This was betrayal. A sharp pain shot through her skull. Cirrus gritted her teeth, grasping the side of her head. The bond was getting worse. She could feel Elias. His tension, his anger, his frustration. But beneath all that, something else. A flicker of concern. For her. Cirrus slammed her fist against the wall. No, she didn't want this connection. She didn't want to be bound to a human. Especially not to him. And yet, she knew the truth. If Elias died, she would die too. And if she died, something deep inside her whispered that Elias wouldn't remain unchanged either. The attempted betrayal. Later that night, the ship's alarms blared. Elias jolted awake in his quarters, immediately grabbing his sidearm. His comm buzzed, and Holt's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Captain, we have a situation. There's been an attempted breach in the containment chamber." Elias was already moving. By the time he reached the containment level, the scene was a mess. Security officers were restraining 2 crew members, both from Holt's squad. One had a plasma knife in hand, the other had been attempting to disable the force field. Cirrus stood inside the chamber, watching everything unfold. Her violet eyes burned with something unreadable. Elias turned to Holt, his voice dangerously low. "Explain this." Holt met his gaze without flinching. They acted alone. Elias wasn't convinced. He walked past them and disabled the force field. Cirrus stepped forward instantly, but not in attack. Her body just reacted to his. "Are you hurt?" Elias asked. She stared at him. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, quietly, she said, "You stopped them." Elias frowned. "I gave the order to keep you alive." Cirrus searched his face, her sharp features unreadable. For the first time, her voice softened, just slightly. "Why?" Elias exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Because I don't kill people who don't deserve it." Cirrus tilted her head. "And if I did deserve it?" Elias hesitated. "Then I'd still want to know why." Something shifted in her expression. It was brief, almost imperceptible. But it was there. A flicker of doubt. A flicker of something else. "Captain," Veros interrupted from behind. "I think you should see this." Elias turned as Veros pulled up a new scan of Cirrus DNA. The readings had changed again. Faster, more unstable. Cirrus wasn't just changing. She was evolving. And the Valeri Empire knew. That was why they wanted her dead. A race against time. The Osiris was no longer safe. Captain Elias Carter knew that the moment he read the second transmission from the Valeri Empire. The anomaly must not live. No diplomacy. No threats. Just a simple, chilling statement. They weren't just coming for Cirrus. They were coming for both of them. Elias looked at the security footage of the attack from earlier. Holt's men had tried to kill Cirrus in her cell, but they weren't the real problem. No, the Valeri assassins were already on their way. And if they reached the Osiris, it would be too late. Elias clenched his jaw. He had fought in enough wars to know when a battle was lost before it began. They needed to leave. Now, inside the containment cell, Cirrus sat on the cold metal bench, staring at her hands. They weren't hers anymore. Her skin, once the cool silver blue of her people, was changing. Faint lines of gold traced along her veins, a color that should not exist in Valeri biology. Her fingers twitched. A dull hum of energy pulsed beneath her skin. Something was waking up inside her, and it terrified her. She heard the doors slide open. Elias stepped in, his expression unreadable. "We're leaving," he said. Cirrus frowned. "What?" "You heard me." Elias said, deactivating the force field. The Vaylari sent assassins. This ship isn't safe anymore. Cirrus stood slowly, watching him. You are risking your crew to protect me. Elias exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You think this is about you. If they get to you, they'll kill everyone who knows about what's happening to you. Cirrus studied his face. There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. He wasn't doing this because of duty. He was doing this because he had made a choice. Cirrus' fists tightened. Then we leave. Elias nodded. Follow me. She almost scoffed. Like I have a choice. Escape from the Osiris. The plan was simple. Steal a stealth cruiser and disappear. But nothing ever went according to plan. The moment they entered the launch bay, the ship's internal defenses activated. The red warning lights flashed across the walls, and the robotic voice of the Osiris Eye echoed across the hangar. Unauthorized vessel activation detected. Security lockdown engaged. Son of a... Elias cursed, pulling out his sidearm. Holt. It has to be him. Cirrus' eyes narrowed. You're second in command. He's not going to let us leave without a fight, Elias said, scanning the hangar for threats. Cirrus could feel the tension in Elias. His pulse quickened, his muscles tensed. And so did hers. She hated this bond, hated how it forced her to feel him. She took a slow breath and focused. We don't have time for this. Then the doors at the far end of the hangar slammed open. Holt and 6 armed soldiers stormed in. Captain Carter, Holt said, his rifle aimed directly at Elias. Step away from the Vaylari. You don't have to do this. Elias turned to face him, his expression hard. I gave you an order, Holt. You ignored it. You're making a mistake, Holt snapped. You think keeping her alive is going to change anything. They don't care about her, Carter. They just don't want whatever she's becoming to exist. Cirrus felt something cold twist in her chest. Even the humans feared what she was turning into. Elias didn't lower his gun. Move. Holt sighed. I can't do that, Captain. Elias' finger tightened on the trigger. Cirrus felt a familiar pull in her gut. The same pull she had felt when the first attack happened. She knew what was coming before it even happened. Her body moved before her mind could think. A shot rang out. Cirrus grabbed Elias and pulled him down just as the bullet grazed past his head. Everything exploded into chaos. Elias fired back. Cirrus lunged forward with unnatural speed, dodging bullets as if she could see them before they were fired. Holt barely had time to react before Cirrus was on him. She grabbed his wrist, twisting the gun from his grip, and with one sharp movement, threw him across the hangar. He hit the metal crates hard and didn't get up. The other soldiers hesitated. Elias turned to Cirrus, eyes wide. What the hell was that? Cirrus stared at her own hands. She had never been that fast before. The soldiers started to back away. They weren't just afraid of her because she was Vaylari. They were afraid because she was becoming something else. Cirrus took a slow breath and turned to Elias. We need to go. Elias hesitated. Then he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the stealth cruiser. As the hatch closed behind them, Cirrus glanced back at Holt's unconscious form. She didn't know why, but something inside her knew this was not the last time she would see him. Fleeing into the unknown. The stealth cruiser launched, vanishing into the vast blackness of space. Elias exhaled, gripping the controls. All right, we're alive. For now. Cirrus sat in the co-pilot seat, her body still buzzing from the fight. She felt different, stronger, faster, like something inside her had unlocked. She looked down at her hands again. The golden lines in her skin were glowing faintly. What is happening to me? She murmured. Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. I don't know, he admitted. Cirrus' jaw tightened. But she did know one thing. The Vaylari were afraid of her. The humans were afraid of her. And whatever she was becoming, it wasn't stopping. The truth about Cirrus, The stealth cruiser drifted in the void, a speck of darkness swallowed by the vast sea of space. Inside, the silence was thick. Tension hung between Captain Elias Carter and Cirrus, the fugitive Velari warrior who had become something more than alien, more than human. Elias kept his hand steady on the controls, but his mind raced. They had escaped. Barely. But they weren't safe. They never would be. Cirrus sat beside him in the co-pilot seat, staring at her hands. The golden veins running through her skin pulsed faintly, like liquid energy flowing beneath the surface. She hadn't spoken in hours. Elias broke the silence. "Are you going to tell me what's happening to you?" Cirrus didn't look at him. "I don't know." "That's not an answer." She exhaled slowly, finally turning to face him. Her violet eyes were different now. Sharper. More alive. "I'm changing. And I don't know why." Elias studied her. "The Velari want you dead. They aren't trying to capture you anymore. That means whatever this is, it scares them." Cirrus' hands clenched. "They fear what they don't understand." "Then help me understand." Elias pressed. She hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "I feel awake." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Cirrus glanced at him, then at the vast nothingness of space outside the viewport. "For my entire life, I believed my body and mind were my own. But since the bond, since the moment you restrained me, I felt something pulling at me, like a part of me was hidden, waiting to be unlocked." She held up her hand, watching the faint golden glow beneath her skin. "And now, it is waking up." Elias exhaled. "So, what are you? A weapon?" Cirrus' jaw tightened. "If I was a weapon, I would have already killed you." "That's comforting," Elias muttered. Cirrus ignored him, her gaze distant. "We need to find answers. Because if the Velari fear what I am, I need to know why." Elias nodded. "I might have a lead on that." Cirrus narrowed her eyes. "Where?" Elias tapped the navigation screen. A set of coordinates glowed on the map. A dead world at the edge of the galaxy, a place that shouldn't exist. The forgotten planet. Hours later, the stealth cruiser entered orbit around Nix 7, an ancient, desolate planet covered in endless dunes of black sand. No life, no structures, just emptiness. Cirrus stared down at the surface from the viewport. A strange sensation crawled under her skin. She knew this place, but she had never been here before. Elias guided the ship through the planet's thick atmosphere, navigating past electrical storms that crackled in the sky. The closer they got to the surface, the stronger the feeling inside Cirrus became. Then, the scanners picked up something impossible. "That's a structure," Elias said, pointing at the readings. Cirrus' pulse quickened. "It's underground." Elias nodded. "And it's old. Very old." He landed the ship near the coordinates, stepping onto the sand with Cirrus beside him. The wind howled, carrying the scent of something ancient, something lost to time. Cirrus felt the pull again. It wasn't coming from the planet itself. It was coming from beneath it. "We need to go deeper," she murmured. Elias glanced at her warily. "And how do you know that?" Cirrus didn't answer. She simply started walking. She couldn't explain it, but she knew exactly where to go. And Elias, despite his instincts, followed. The descent into the unknown. They discovered an entrance buried beneath the sand, a passage leading underground. The walls of the tunnel were lined with markings, strange symbols neither of them recognized. Cirrus traced a hand along the carvings. A faint warmth pulsed through her fingertips. Elias noticed. "What is it?" Cirrus swallowed. "This place. It feels familiar." Elias tensed. "That's not supposed to be possible." Cirrus didn't answer. Instead, she pressed her palm against the wall. The symbols lit up, not with the cold blue of Velari technology, but with the same golden light running through Cirrus' veins. Then the wall opened. Elias took a step back. "I'm guessing that's not normal." Ceres ignored him and stepped inside. The chamber beyond was vast, stretching into the darkness. At the center stood a single structure, an altar, old and cracked with age, and resting atop it, a holographic projection flickered to life. A voice, deep, powerful, ancient, echoed through the chamber. "You have returned at last." Ceres froze. "What?" Elias raised his weapon. "Who the hell said that?" The projection sharpened. A towering figure stood before them, its form flickering. It was not Valari, not human, something else entirely. "Ceres of the Valari," the figure intoned. "Or rather, what remains of you." Ceres' breath caught. "You know me." The figure nodded. "You are the last of us, the last of the ardent." Elias' brow furrowed. "The what?" The projection ignored him. "The Valari were never your people," it said. "You were made to be something greater, and they tried to erase you." Ceres felt a sharp pain in her skull, a rush of memories that weren't hers, flashes of faces she didn't recognize, a battle long before she was born, the betrayal of an entire species. The Valari had not created her. They had stolen her. The voice grew softer. "You were meant to awaken when the time was right. And now, you are." Ceres took a step back, her breathing uneven. Elias looked between her and the projection. "What does this mean?" The figure's eyes locked onto him. "It means your war is about to change." Then the entire chamber shook. A distant roar echoed through the tunnels. Ceres turned toward the entrance, her heart pounding. "Something's coming." Elias pulled out his weapon. "Something big." The projection's final words echoed in the chamber before vanishing. "Survive, or be erased. The final battle begins." The ground rumbled beneath them. Ceres and Elias stood in the ancient underground chamber, staring at the fading hologram of the mysterious figure who had just revealed the truth. Ceres was not Valari. She was ardent, a species that had been erased from history. And now, the ones who had buried that truth were coming to finish what they started. Elias gripped his weapon, eyes scanning the dark tunnels leading back to the surface. "We need to move. Now." Ceres' pulse pounded in her ears. The energy within her veins hummed, reacting to the ancient walls around them. She could feel something outside. A presence. A hunter. Her voice was calm, but deadly serious. "They're already here." The Valari hunter. The first explosion shook the tunnels, sending chunks of stone raining from the ceiling. Elias grabbed Ceres and pulled her back as a massive metal drone-like construct crashed into the chamber entrance. It was twice the size of a human, its sleek silver armor glowing with Valari energy signatures. Long, bladed arms extended from its body, pulsing with red energy. Then the real threat stepped through. A figure emerged from the dust, a Valari warlord, clad in dark armor etched with ancient markings. His silver-blue skin was marked with ritual scars, and his violet eyes locked onto Ceres immediately. "You should not exist," he said coldly. Ceres' breath hitched. She knew him. Commander Valrax, the executioner of the ardent genocide, the one responsible for ensuring her kind never rose again. Valrax's voice was smooth, almost cruel. "You should not have survived." Ceres' fingers curled into fists. "And yet, here I am." Elias stepped forward, keeping his gun trained on Valrax. "We can stand here and talk, or you can tell me why the Valari are so damn scared of her." Valrax barely glanced at him. The Ardent were not destroyed because they were weak, human. They were destroyed because they were stronger than us, stronger than anyone. He unsheathed a glowing blade from his hip, and that mistake will not be repeated. Then he attacked. The battle for survival. Valrax moved impossibly fast. One moment he was meters away, the next he was on them. His blade slashed through the air, aimed directly for Ceres. But something inside her reacted. Ceres dodged before she even saw the attack. Her body moved on instinct, as if it had always known how to fight at this level. She countered with a strike of her own, her hands crackling with golden energy. The power within her veins ignited, a surge of raw force slamming into Valrax's blade. The impact sent a shockwave ripping through the chamber. Elias was already moving, firing precise shots at the Valari warlord, but the drones activated their shields, deflecting his attacks. "Of course they have shields," Elias muttered, rolling to cover behind an ancient stone pillar. "Why wouldn't they?" Cirrus wasn't focused on the drones. Her mind was locked onto Valrax. "You're afraid," she said, stepping forward. "You think you can stop me before I understand what I am." Valrax's expression didn't change. "I know I can." Then the drones opened fire. Cirrus' instincts sharpened. She saw the shots before they happened. Time slowed. She dodged between the blasts, moving like flowing water, her body reacting faster than thought. Then she ripped the nearest drone apart with her bare hands. Elias' eyes widened. "Okay, that's new." Cirrus turned, the golden glow in her veins burning brighter. "Stay behind me." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Not usually my style, but sure." Valrax charged again, this time faster. Cirrus met him in a clash of pure energy, gold colliding with red, power rippling through the cavern. The ground beneath them cracked, ancient walls crumbling under the force of their battle. But Cirrus was winning. She was getting faster, stronger. Her strikes forced Valrax back. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. "You can't stop it," Cirrus said, her voice steady. "I'm not just ardent anymore. I'm something new." Valrax's lips curled. "Then you are an abomination." He pressed something on his wrist. A countdown timer appeared in the air. Elias' stomach dropped. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Cirrus' eyes narrowed. "You would destroy this entire planet just to stop me." Valrax smirked. "It worked once before." Then he vanished in a teleportation flash. "The clock is ticking." Elias didn't hesitate. "We need to go. Now." Cirrus stared at the space where Valrax had stood, anger burning in her chest. Then she turned, sprinting for the exit with Elias close behind. The tunnels shook violently. The self-destruct sequence had begun. "How long do we have?" Cirrus shouted as they ran. "Not long." Elias checked his wrist display. 3 minutes, maybe less. They burst into the open air, sprinting across the black sand toward their ship. The sky above them was burning, streaked with the light of incoming Valari warships. "They're sending an entire fleet," Elias muttered. "Guess you really scare them." Cirrus didn't respond. Her veins were glowing fully now, her body brimming with energy. Then she felt it. Something deep inside her unlocked. A memory, a power, a weapon. Elias noticed the change in her. "Cirrus." She turned to face the incoming fleet, eyes blazing with golden fire. And then she raised her hand. The sky exploded. A choice that changes everything. The sky exploded in a burst of golden fire. Cirrus stood at the edge of the ancient ruins, her hand outstretched, golden energy crackling through the air. The incoming Valari fleet, dozens of warships descending from orbit, halted. Not because they wanted to, because she had made them stop. Elias Carter, still catching his breath from their desperate escape, turned and stared. His fingers tightened around his weapon, but for the first time, he wasn't sure who the real threat was. The Valari had feared Cirrus for a reason. Now he understood why. Cirrus wasn't just fighting back. She was controlling the battlefield. The awakening. Cirrus' mind opened. The energy within her veins stirred, unlocking memories buried deep in her DNA. She could see it now, the war that had happened long before her birth. The Ardent had not been destroyed because they were weak. They had been destroyed because they were unstoppable. She saw flashes of the past, ardent warriors standing against entire armadas, bending gravity, altering time itself, warping space with a thought. They had been too powerful. And the Valari? They had feared them so much that they had united with other species to erase them. But they hadn't finished the job. One ardent had survived. And now, that power was waking up inside her. Ceres clenched her fists. She was stronger than any Valari, stronger than any human, stronger than anyone had ever been. She could end this war. She could break the Valari once and for all. She could. No. A sharp, grounding thought sliced through her mind. A voice. Elias. She turned, locking eyes with him. His face was unreadable, but his eyes weren't. They were filled with something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not anger. Warning. Ceres, he said slowly, stepping toward her. I need you to breathe. Her body wasn't listening. The energy inside her was raging, begging to be unleashed. The Valari ships trembled in the sky, locked in place by the sheer force of her will. Ceres didn't even know how she was doing it, but she knew she could crush them, with just a thought. Ceres. Elias' voice pulled her back. Let them go. Ceres blinked. What? You don't want to do this, Elias said firmly. Ceres' breathing was uneven. She could feel the raw power inside her, the hunger for vengeance, for justice. But was that really what she wanted? She looked at the fleet again. Then, slowly, she lowered her hand. The Valari ships jerked free of her unseen grip, retreating in a panic. The fleet broke formation and fled. The Valari Empire had come to destroy her. Instead, they had run from her. Aftermath. The battlefield was silent. Elias exhaled, lowering his gun. Ceres swayed slightly, her energy fading. She had never felt this exhausted before. Elias stepped forward, steadying her before she could fall. That was. He hesitated. That was something. Ceres looked up at him, searching his face. You're not afraid of me. Elias gave a small, humorless laugh. Oh, I'm definitely afraid. But I think you are too. Ceres was quiet. He was right. She had been seconds away from wiping out an entire fleet with a thought. And it had felt easy. Elias watched her carefully. You had a choice back there. Ceres met his gaze. And? You chose to let them go. She exhaled. You sound surprised. I am, Elias admitted. Because now I have to ask, what do you want to do next? The choice. Ceres looked at the horizon. For the first time in her life, she had no orders, no mission. The Valari Empire had betrayed her. The humans had feared her. She was something new, something that didn't belong to either side. Elias watched her. You could disappear, you know. No one would ever find you. Ceres considered that. Then, slowly, she shook her head. No, she said. I can't walk away. Elias nodded. Then what? Ceres took a deep breath. If the Valari Empire is afraid of me, they won't stop, she said. They'll send more assassins, more ships. They'll hunt me until I'm dead. Elias exhaled. Then we don't let them. Ceres turned to him. You're really going to stand against your own people for me? Elias smirked. You think I'd follow orders that blindly? Ceres studied him. You could leave now. Go back to your war. Pretend this never happened. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Not a chance. Something shifted between them. For the first time, Ceres felt something that wasn't fear, anger, or vengeance. Something new. Elias Carter had been her enemy. Then her captor. Then her unexpected ally. Now, she wasn't sure what they were anymore. But she knew one thing. Wherever she went, he would follow. Epilogue. The Legend of the Ardent. Far across the galaxy, deep in the halls of the Valari High Command, a war council sat in silence. The footage from Nix 7 flickered in the air before them. A lone figure, Ceres, standing against an entire fleet. And winning. The High Commander's voice was grim. The Ardent are returning. Silence. Then, finally, a single order. find her, or erase her, no matter the cost. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning.